Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome this evening's guest moderator from The Playlist, Drew Taylor, and tonight's guests, Dr. Jane Goodall, Alastair Fothergill, and Keith Scholey.
Now, there's another person who I wish was here tonight, which, when you guys go see the movie, which of course you will this week, you'll see some behind-the-scenes footage in the credits, and there's one guy who goes, "Bear, go around the camera crew." Was that a dedicated person, or was that one of you guys, or who was that? Because they need to be here.
That was one of the fantastic bear guides that we worked with. We made this film in Katmai National Park in Alaska. It's a wonderful place to film bears because they have no fear of man. And there are some fantastic bear guides that work with tourists. And they know bear manners. They know exactly how to behave around a bear. I can tell you sometime about that. And those guys were helping us make sure that the bears and us were relaxed with each other.
They're really funny in the credits. Now, the first question is obviously, how did Dr. Jane get involved in this, and what sort of capacity did she have on this movie?
Well, it started because the last movie was chimpanzees, and obviously I was a good choice to help to promote the film. And so I promoted the chimpanzee film. We have a huge network of our young people, roots and shoots, right across the country. And we told them, you know, if you go the first week, then some of the percentage will go to help chimpanzee conservation. And so when the next movie came along, I think it was Disney who said, well, maybe you would promote bears as well. Do you care about bears? And I said, of course I care about bears. And so I'm now an ambassador for Disneynature and very happy to take that role.
And did you go up to Alaska and watch these guys film at all, or what?
Yeah, that was the great draw, because I'd always wanted to go to Alaska. And so I went. I had 2 days there and I met the stars of the movie and saw a lot of other stuff. The weather was absolutely perfect, and I had an amazing experience.
And, I mean, had you always been interested in bears? Or, I mean, obviously your work is mostly with chimpanzees. I mean, what's the draw? Why are bears so fascinating to you?
Well, bears, wolves, cougars. I mean, I just love all. I mean, I happened to be offered the opportunity to study chimpanzees. So, of course, that was fantastic. But that didn't mean that I'm not fascinated by so many other of the amazing animals around the planet. I wish I had many, many lives. I would study them all, including bears.
Would there be any animal you'd just say, no, I'm not really, no?
No, I'm going to study the whole lot.
Okay, all right. Now, guys, you've done a number of these Disneynature movies. How do you go about figuring out what sort of is going to be the next topic? Where did bears come from?
Well, with Disneynature films, we always want to go for big, charismatic animals that are going to hold a movie, really. And we'd done African cats and chimpanzees before, and I guess the bears had to be the next obvious candidate. But there's also the consideration, you might have a great animal, a great character, but have you got the location, have you got the place where you can make a film about their lives that's going to sustain 80 minutes and only film it in the wild? And we happen to know that in Katmai National Park, we've done television filming there in the past, that situation was absolutely there. So those two things came together: great animal, great location.
Is there ever any point in these movies where you wonder if you're going to have a narrative to sustain? I mean, there's a couple of moments in this movie where you go, if this bear does not get food, then that's it. That's not only it for the movie, but that's it for the bear. I mean, do you ever have those kind of moments?
You've probably hit on the biggest thing that keeps Keith and I awake at night. I mean, we write a classic Hollywood 60-page script. Of course, the bears have never bothered to read the script. And, we decided the narrative was a mother bringing up her cubs in the first year. We went for that because we know that in the wild, 50% of the cubs die. And that was obviously an amazing drama. But then Disney movies all have happy endings. And that's in the contract. And we had some very nervous moments. There's some extraordinary interactions between a wolf, which never been seen or filmed before. And we genuinely thought that wolf might take one of our cubs, and that was going to be a real issue. Yeah, it is a big problem. Making a movie rather than a TV documentary. With a TV documentary, it doesn't matter. But when a movie is about characters that you engage in and a story that carries you from the beginning to the end of the movie, and our actors, unfortunately, don't take direction.
Was there ever any moment? I mean, besides, what would happen if one of the cubs got taken away? Would you keep shooting? I mean, would you try to just sort of
we'd
reconcile
have to keep shooting. We definitely would. That hasn't happened yet. I mean, it's to be honest, I don't know quite what we'd do.
Now, what did you sort of take from Dr. Jane's sort of research and history for this movie? I kept thinking about, she was sort of criticized in the scientific community for giving names to animals instead of numbers. These animals obviously have names in your movie. Was there anything else that you kind of drew from her research for this?
Her research obviously is principally on chimpanzees, so it wasn't directly relevant to this movie, but Jane was the first person to actually say to the scientific community, hang on, animals have characters, animals have personalities. And, I mean, Jane should tell this story, but I know that they were very skeptical in those days. They actually criticized her for giving the chimps names. They thought they should have numbers. Animal behavior was all about numbering animals in those days. And in a sense, what she did is an inspiration, actually. It sort of hits the heart of what these movies are about. Right. And we make no apology that they're anthropomorphic, because that's what human beings want to do with animals. And actually, what's really interesting is, if you look at the way chimpanzee and primate research has come full circle, you go and look at the research they're doing today on chimpanzees, and it's extraordinarily anthropomorphic. They constantly are saying, do chimps have the sort of level of language that we have? And it's sort of, well, Jane should talk about this more than me, but it amuses me that science has really come full circle and recognized that Jane's original inspiration is what we should be doing now.
Do you want to talk about that at all, Jane?
Well, when I got to Cambridge University, I'd been with the chimpanzees about a year, and I'd never been to college. But Louis Leakey told me I would have to get a degree if I wanted to get my own money, and that I had no time to do a BA. I had to go straight for a PhD. So Cambridge in England is sort of a very top science university. And so I was pretty horrified to get there and be told by these professors I'd done everything wrong, and that only human beings had personalities, only human beings had minds capable of thought, and only human beings had emotions. And the great thing was that I'd had a teacher as a child who taught me that the professors were absolutely wrong and gave me the courage of my convictions, and that teacher was my dog, Rusty. Because you can't share your life with any animal in a meaningful way and not know that these are not sole attributes of the human animal. And so the chimpanzee research made it very clear there is not a sharp line dividing us from the rest of the animal kingdom. It's a very blurry line. And once you realize, that we are part of the animal kingdom and not separated from it, we and bears are mammals. So why wouldn't we expect a bear, like a chimpanzee, to have emotions of happiness and sadness and fear and despair? It makes much more sense. And now that universities are actually studying animal emotion, they can actually study scientifically what emotion actually is. And of course animals have emotions.
Now, what sort of surprised, and this is for all you guys, while filming it, what really surprised you the most? And Jane, watching it, what surprised you while seeing the sort of finished version of Bears unfold?
I think there are always things that you script and expect, but there are also these things that come out from nowhere. I guess the biggest surprise for us was the wolf character that came into the film. We knew in Katmai National Park there are wolves, and you see them, but all across North America, especially grey wolves, the southern wolves, are very, very timid. And I don't know of any place in North America where you'd get grey wolves to actually come as close as you are to me and be comfortable with that. And this situation played out when we were there during our filming trip, that a number of wolves became habituated to us, and one in particular. And that allowed us to see how wolves and bears interact with each other. And I think we're probably some of the few people on this planet who've actually seen that, let alone film it. And so that was very, very special. And we got an insight into this that no one else had had, but it certainly made our film a lot better too.
The other thing which was the dexterity of the bears. I mean, they're big animals with great paws, and seeing them open tiny clams amazingly, and all this sort of the detail. One of the wonderful things about spending hours, months with bears, with any animal actually, is you start seeing things. And the little things actually are often the most surprising actually.
Now, we have a clip of from bears that we can run now, right? And you'll see sort of the scout, right, sort of choosing which bear he thinks he's going to grow up to be. So let's watch that. Thank you. Now, in that clip, we got to hear the sort of unsung hero of bears, John C. Reilly. I was wondering if you guys could talk a little bit about him and what he sort of brought to this movie.
I think one of the very important things about the Disneynature movies is they are movies. Keith and I have worked in documentary. I mean, we worked on Planet Earth and Frozen Planet and Blue Planet, some of those big series with Attenborough. And we want these to be movies, and we don't want them to feel educational. We want them to feel entertaining. And the choice of the voice is really, really important. And when Disney said, how about J.C. Reilly, we were delighted. Partly because he is a bear in human skin, so he comes into the... But also we were recording the narration, which we'd spent months and months writing, and he starts riffing and comes up with all sorts... There's a sleeping bear, and he says, that guy looks just like my dad watching TV. And, you know, quite a lot of that stuff made it into the movie, and it seems to go down really well, particularly with kids.
Now, I just want to ask all three of you what it's like to be part of this amazing sort of history of Disney, because Disney really invented the nature film, and you know what that's like to continue that and the sort of advocacy behind it. Can you just talk to what that's like?
Well, I feel so strongly that movies like this provide such a intimate look into the life of a bear, and the characters of the bear, and the fun that they can have, and the drama and the violence, and hopefully will just encourage some children to want to see nature for themselves. They maybe can't go to Alaska, but there are a lot of places in America where people have moved into bear habitat, and they are having to learn to live with bears.
I think we're going to now open it up for questions, right?
Thank you. I was wondering what percentage of the profits go to habitat protection or expansion?
I don't know the exact figure, actually. What I know is that if you go to the movie in the first week, a percentage of the box office goes to, in this case, the National Parks Foundation. Last year, when we did the Chimps movie, the money went to the Jane Goodall Institute. And it was a pretty substantial donation, wasn't it, Jane? It made a lot of difference to the institution. It's real money, and to be honest, but I don't know the figures. I never know the figures.
Did you have conversations about what it would take and how far you would have to go to get the movie in terms of not invading the how do you go about deciding how far you will go to get shots and dealing with invasiveness? I've had the opportunity to go to jungles in different remote areas, and I realize every step I'm taking I'm altering something, the environment and the surroundings. So I just didn't know if you had conversations about that.
We don't really need to have conversations because it's so ingrained in us. I mean, the basic rule about wildlife filmmaking is the animals come first. You never, ever disturb them. And to be honest, that's quite a selfish decision to make because we're only interested in filming natural behavior. And if you start disturbing an animal, they won't behave naturally. And we never interfere. People often say, if you see a starving animal, why don't you feed it? You clearly can't. You're not there for long enough. And no, our skill is to record without in any way disturbing.
And I'll just pick up on that. With the Bears film itself, the remarkable history of Katmai National Park is that at the start of the last century, it was obliterated by this huge volcano. And there are no people that live there. And the whole wilderness regenerated, and the bears were part of the wilderness. And when people started going to the Hallow Bay area, these bears had had no experience of people, and they were completely unbothered by them. And so and then people would be going in, taking tourists in, and so on and so forth. And they've been very careful how they've maintained that relationship with the bears. And that makes it perfect for a film crew, because we can just go in and live in that kind of way. So if you ever go to Hallow Bay in Katmai, you don't feel at all that actually you're actually invading their privacy or disturbing them. It's a very much a case of being with very habituated animals that are quite content with you being there.
Hi, I'm just wondering, what's the next animal movie you may do?
The next one is called Monkey Kingdom, and it's about an extraordinary group of monkeys that live in Sri Lanka. They live in these wonderful temples. It's really the real Jungle Book, to be honest. And what's great about these monkeys is they spend half their lives inside this national park, but they spend half their lives raiding the local towns. And because the local people, their religion doesn't allow them to interfere with animals in any way, we filmed in a baker's shop when all our monkeys just came and stole the whole of the week's baking. And they ride on the buses, they ride on the trains. They are the ultimate Disney nature stars. I tell you, it's going to be a very, very funny movie.
You can watch the trailer right now on apple.com/trailers.
Hello, how are you? This is for Jane Goodall. I'm curious, have you ever written fiction or anything that relates to your science?
No, I've never written fiction.
Oh, okay.
I've written popular books. And, when I wrote the first book, and it was for the National Geographic Society, their series of books, because that was part of the agreement. They were paying for all the research, and one of the things I would do for them was write a book, which nowadays would seem normal, right? Most scientists write books. It's something they do. They want to share what they've learned. But when I went to Cambridge and this book came out, I was very nearly sent down. They were so utterly shocked that a scientist would write a popular book. It just wasn't done. It was the ivory tower mentality taken to absurd lengths. And, the whole idea is to write in such a way that only another scientist can understand you. So I made a vow at that time that I would never write in such a way that a reasonably intelligent 16-year-old wouldn't be able to understand it.
Is there any animal that you wouldn't do? That you wouldn't film, or,
For Disneynature? Or
for Disneynature.
Yeah, yes. The real challenge is movies have to run 75 minutes. I don't know if you know that, but if you don't run 75 minutes, it doesn't count as a movie. And that's our biggest challenge, because when we did African Cats, the first one, we were filming in the Serengeti. It was a story about lions and cheetahs, but there's an awful lot of other animals going on there, and we filmed a lot of it. And we found as we got into the cutting room that people got so engaged with the story of our lioness and our cheetah cubs that whenever we cut away from our main story, it just didn't work as a movie. And we found that with chimpanzee, and we've definitely found that with bears. And the hardest question is, will this animal deliver 75 minutes? And you have to know your animals very, very, very well. And quite a lot of lovely animals that you'd think would probably don't. So I think our main risk is running out of animals. Sorry.
Jane, you've said that you have a strong suspicion that there is a Bigfoot or Yeti or something. Why don't you guys team up? We'll track this thing down. No? I
would love there to be one, and every single country I've been in, they have their own story of the same sort of thing: the Yeti, the Yari, the wild man, and I've had some really interesting stories. Like, I asked a He was a hunter living in the wilds of Ecuador. I mean, miles from any road. And communication between the different little villages was this hunter going around like an old minstrel. And so I asked him one simple question. Can you ask the villagers if they've seen a monkey without a tail? That's all I said, a monkey without a tail. 3 different answers came back. Yes, we've seen a monkey which walks upright and it's about 6 foot high and it doesn't have a tail. From the middle of nowhere. So what do you make of that?
What do you think, guys? Disneynature presents Yeti.
That would be a budget to get that movie. I think CGI might get involved.
Thank you. It's been fascinating to watch the trailers, and I can't wait to see the movie. How long did it take you to film the movie, from the beginning to, say, the birth of the cubs to the end? And the other thing I wanted to ask is, generally the males, bears will kill the cubs if they have a chance. Was there ever any action that you saw like that?
Well,
spoiler alert, by the way.
To answer your first question, we had 2 years to make the film. We always, whenever we make a film like this, the minimum is 2 years. We prefer 3. And it's quite interesting. We're lucky we did have 2, because the first year, there'd been a very, very harsh winter in Alaska the year before, and a poor salmon year, and very few of the mother bears had cubs. And so most of the film we shot in the second year. So we were lucky to have another go at it. Yes, absolutely. In terms of the males with the female bears and cubs, our film crews witnessed. Well, there is one very big fight in the film itself of a male attacking Sky. But the film crews witnessed that on 2 or 3 occasions, and on one occasion, actually, a cub was killed by a male. And sadly, the greatest mortality of bear cubs in the wild is actually males. But that said, that is all part of the biology of the Society of Bears, and we shouldn't be judgmental about it. That's just how it is. And it's always been like that, so.
Do you ever have to worry about your own safety when making a film? And if so, what kind of things do you do to protect yourselves?
I think you really have to understand your animal. I mean, brown bears in certain situations can be dangerous. I'm sure you've all heard the stories. You may even have seen the movie. But we, as Keith said, we chose Katmai because those bears particularly are not frightened of people. But also we work with very, very good local guides who's been there for 20, 30 years. And we never went out without one of them because they were really helpful in sort of understanding bear behavior, bear good manners, really, how to behave well around a bear. Undoubtedly, I always say the most dangerous thing about wildlife filmmaking, in our case, is driving to Heathrow Airport. And although some African roads can be interesting at times, no, people are far more dangerous than any of the animals out there.
And, and our we go through a lot of safety planning. And most of our focus was on the only way to get into where we were filming is in a small Cessna airplane and landing on the beach. And you have to cross the Chelikov Strait. It's an hour's flight over just ocean in a Cessna. And I tell you, that focuses our minds so much more than any of the bears.
It would have focused mine even more because I was in one of those Cessnas and it crashed and never flew again. In Ruaha National Park.
I was wondering how many hours of footage you worked with and how many crews were going, because looking at the movie, there was just, these amazing shots, and I do some photography, and I think just one of those shots would have been happy for a long, long time, and then you just one after another you're putting up there.
We are very fortunate to work with the very top in our business, and they're all specialist wildlife cameramen largely, but there was a amazingly talented camerawoman who worked on this movie. Bears go into hibernation for 6 months of the year, as I'm sure you know, so the season of filming bears is relatively short. which meant that we had always 2 crews, sometimes 3 crews. They're very small crews. Basically, one camera operator, a camera assistant who's basically lugging the tripod, because it was all on foot. There was no vehicle access to the Katmai National Park, and as we said before, a guide. And we shot hundreds and hundreds of days in the field, and I think we filmed about 400 hours that were then cut down to 75 minutes.
It's longer than Apocalypse Now. I think he had more footage than Apocalypse Now.
It felt a bit like it making it at times, yeah.
Now, Alastair already avoided this question backstage, but I want to ask everyone here, what is your favorite cinematic bear? Bears have had a very long history with cinema, and there's been a number of bears on the big screen. What is your favorite bear? Who is your favorite bear?
Winnie the Pooh.
That's a good answer. Jane? Jane, do you have a favorite bear?
Not really. No.
Do you watch a lot of movies?
You see, the point is I've almost never had the chance to watch movies because I've been out in the field.
You're being a real person. Yes.
You know? So I just love the bears in this, so I'm going to say that Scout is my favorite bear.
What about you, Keith?
I'd like to say Ted, but I don't think I should.
Well, I just want to thank, obviously, our amazing guests here. Alastair and Greg, wonderful filmmakers, and Jane, obviously, you're a legend. Thank you so much for coming out. And everyone go see Bears, because it's really good, and I'm not just saying that. And a percentage of the proceeds will go to the National Park Fund the first week, right? And that it does make a difference. So thank you guys so much for coming out, and enjoy the rest of your night. Would there be any animal you'd just say, no, I'm not really? No.
No, I'm going to study the whole lot.
Okay, all right. Now, guys, you've done a number of these Disneynature movies. How do you go about figuring out what sort of is going to be the next topic? Where did bears come from?
Well, with Disneynature films, we always want to go for big, charismatic animals that are going to hold a movie, really. And we'd done African cats and chimpanzees before, and I guess the bears had to be the next obvious candidate. But there's also the consideration you might have a great...
Some fantastic bear guides that work with tourists, and they know bear manners. They know exactly how to behave around a bear. I can tell you sometime about that. And those guys were helping us make sure that the bears and us were relaxed with each other.
They're really funny in the credits. Now, the first question is obviously, how did Dr. Jane get involved in this, and what sort of capacity did she have on this movie?
Well, it started because the last movie was chimpanzees. And obviously, I was a good choice to help to promote the film. And so I promoted the chimpanzee film. We have a huge network of our young people and saw a lot of other stuff. The weather was absolutely perfect. And I had an amazing experience.
And, I mean, had you always been interested in bears? Or, I mean, obviously your work is mostly with chimpanzees. I mean, what's the draw? Why are bears so fascinating to you?
Well, bears, wolves, cougars. I mean, I just love all. I mean, I happened to be offered the opportunity to study chimpanzees. So, of course, that was fantastic. But that didn't mean that I'm not fascinated by so many other of the amazing animals around the planet. I wish I had many, many lives. I would study them all, including bears.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome this evening's guest moderator from The Playlist, Drew Taylor, and tonight's guests, Dr. Jane Goodall, Alastair Fothergill, and Keith Scholey.
Now, there's another person who I wish was here tonight, which, when you guys go see the movie, which of course you will this week, you'll see some behind-the-scenes footage in the credits, and there's one guy who goes, "Bear, go around the camera crew." Was that a dedicated person, or was that one of you guys, or who was that? Because they need to be here.
That was one of the fantastic bear guides we worked with. We made this film in Katmai National Park in Alaska. It's a wonderful place to film bears because they have no fear of man. And there are
shoots and shoots right across the country, and we told them, you know, if you go the first week, then some of the percentage will go to help chimpanzee conservation. And so when the next movie came along, I think it was Disney who said, well, maybe you would promote bears as well. Do you care about bears? And I said, of course I care about bears. And so I'm now an ambassador for Disneynature, and very happy to take that role.
And did you go up to Alaska and watch these guys film at all, or what?
Yeah, that was the great draw because I'd always wanted to go to Alaska, and so I went. I had 2 days there, and I met the stars of the movie.